I'm Dr. Kerry Dore. I am a science instructor at Millbrook School in Millbrook, New York.
Hello, I'm John Rossi. I'm a touring drummer with a passion for animal conservation. When I'm on the road, I spend as much time as possible visiting zoos, aquariums, and conservation organizations. Now, I want to share those places with you. I'll be talking to keepers, vets, conservationists, anyone who can help me in my mission of connecting my people to animals through their people. Join me on my Rossifari. Hi, hello, how are you? Welcome back to the Rossifari podcast. All right, y'all. So, this episode is such a unique, different episode. And it stems from, well, honestly, I have to say it stems from me failing my friend Dan at the Trevor-Lovejoy Zoo, which is, of course, as you all know, the zoo at a high school in New York that is AZA accredited and is awesome. And we feature them on the pod all the time. Love our friends at the Trevor-Lovejoy Zoo. And so when I told Dan that I wanted to visit and meet the new binturongs and see the red panda cub and I guess also do podcast stuff, we set up a couple of great interviews. And he said one of the people that he really wanted me to talk to was Dr. Kerry Dore. And the reason why is that the students at the school, some of them are in a cohort where they do an independent research project, and many of those are focused on the zoo. So even though Dr. Dore doesn't work at the zoo necessarily in the sense of being like a keeper or something, she's there, she has her doctorate, she's leading these incredible research projects with these students. It's a very cool situation. And so Dan was like, hey, let's have you go and talk to Dr. Dore all about those projects. And we do a little bit. But the truth is that Dr. Dore is awesome. And she is an ethnoprimatologist and an anthropologist and all kinds of other ists and cool things. And so we start off talking about her life and her career. And I know that's how the podcast usually starts, but like, there's a lot of really cool, interesting research with animals and especially primates and stuff that we talk about there. And then we get to her time at Millbrook and talk about, you know, the research projects and advanced biology and all of the cool things she does there for a little bit. And then, y'all, you know how I talk about how, like, I love when my podcast goes off the rails and our conversation just becomes a conversation and we talk about things, right? That happened. That happened for the whole second half of this conversation. And honestly, it was only the fact that we were getting to the hour mark that made me stop. I would have sat with Dr. Dore all day and just chatted with mics on and then given it to you because honestly, the conversation was incredible. So you've got a bunch of, it's almost like 3 little mini episodes, even though it's the same person. So you're going to hear about an ethnoprimatologist doing things. Then you're going to hear about independent research projects at the Trevor-Lovejoy Zoo. And then you're just going to hear us talk about some controversial topics in the zoo world, certain words and whether they should be used or not and stuff like that. And I don't normally give y'all a huge, like, you know, intro in this intro section, like where I tell you what you're going to hear because I don't know, I just feel like you'll figure it out as you listen. But this just went all over the place. It was kind of amazing. This is one of those episodes where I'm just like, everyone in the world should hear this person speak because they're just an incredible person. So I'm excited to share that with you. Before we get to it, of course, a couple of quick reminders. Make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes, our Tuesday interview episodes or our Friday Zoo News episodes. Make sure that you are following along on the socials at Rossifari or on TikTok at Rossifari Pod. And don't forget that you can support the podcast in 2 ways now. Patreon.com/Rossifari is there to make a monthly donation. You can start with as little as $3 a month to be a patron. But also, if you are interested in follow bracelets, especially with the holidays coming up, if you click the link on my profile, it's easiest to find on Instagram, right up at the top there. It will take you to a page where we're all get a small percentage of whatever you spend there. And I would super appreciate anyone doing that if you want to get some follow bracelets or stuffed animals or merch for yourself or for anyone for the holiday season. And not only will that help me out, but you can use code Rossifari20 to get 20% off one purchase at that website. So it's win-win, y'all. So with all of that said, let's get to my very free-ranging conversation with Dr. Kerry Dore of the Millbrook School.
I've worked here. This is my 4th school year, and boarding school teachers have a lot of responsibilities, but teaching-wise, I teach independent science research, which I want to talk to you a lot about today because we really utilize the zoo exceptionally well in there. And I teach advanced biology. So that's a broader scoping class, but my PhD is in primatology, biological anthropology. So for my advanced bio class, I spend a good chunk of time talking about primate behavior methods. And so we come into the zoo and utilize this resource in advanced bio too. And then I am a dorm parent in Abbott Hall with the 3rd form girls, freshman girls, and I coach softball in the spring.
Wow.
And I also direct our internship program.
Goodness.
Work Engage.
Okay. Wow. Well, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Very cool. So, we want to talk about the independent projects as kind of the focus today. But before we do, let's talk primatologist a little bit. How
Sure.
did you get into that? What's your background? All that? What brought you here?
Yes. It's a long story. I'm almost 45. I always knew I wanted to study primates. Zoo exposure, really. I'm from the Philadelphia area.
Okay.
I heard you're from Pittsburgh-ish?
No. I live in Buffalo now,
okay.
but I spent many years in Philly. So like Elmwood Park Zoo is like my heart zoo.
That's my backyard.
Yes. Okay.
So I'm from, my parents' mailing address is Norristown, actually. But they're like in Collegeville, near Ursinus College. So I grew up going to Elmwood Park Zoo. And then as a college student, I worked at the Philly Zoo for a couple of summers as a primate interpreter. And that's a really special place because when I was a kid in the 90s, the primate center burned down on Christmas Eve. It was horrifying. And so we had this incredible state-of-the-art primate facility. And it was a joy to work there. And then I went to college at Franklin and Marshall in central Pennsylvania. And I chose to go there because they had a primate lab. So it was in psychology. So my major was animal behavior. Minor was anthropology. But they didn't have biological anthropology at F&M. So I didn't really know what it was. I knew I wanted to study primates. And as I know now, there are so many different disciplines where you can study primates. It's just from different lenses. And so I really struggled after graduating to figure out where my academic home would be. So then I worked for a couple of years and was applying to programs because I wouldn't go unless I had funding because I had undergrad debt, and that was my choice. So I ended up doing genetics research for a couple of years, which opened the door to me to then work with my advisor, who was at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. She's a geneticist, studies green monkeys.
Okay.
And she works primarily in South Africa. So for my master's, I did genetic variability and vervet monkeys in South Africa. And I liked the lab work, but I was way more interested in the field component of what I was doing. As an undergrad, I was doing all this laboratory animal stuff with my animal behavior major, but then I studied abroad in Tanzania. And then I was like, okay, that's what I want to do. I want to do field work. And so for graduate school, I did the kind of more laboratory-oriented genetic stuff. But then for my PhD, I knew I wanted to be in the field. And while I was working in South Africa, what I was most interested in was like the conflict that led to a lot of vervet monkeys ending up in rehabilitation centers. We were genotyping them and looking at whether combining animals from like different parts of the country would create hybrids that then weren't particularly well adapted to any environment, right? Can we re-release them? Sort of like the ethics of all of that. But I was way more interested in the human-animal relationship. So then for my PhD, I became an ethnoprimatologist. So essentially looking at human-primate relationships and all of their forms, captive and free-ranging. And my advisor went, while I was like doing my coursework and all the stuff, I was planning to go to South Africa and study the human-primate conflict. But then my advisor went to St. Kitts and Nevis to trap monkeys for genetic research, 2 islands, 1 country. And everyone hates the monkeys there. So she trapped about 600 to 800 monkeys on the 2 islands and then let them go. And all the locals were just devastated. Why are you letting them go? You need to take them. You need to kill them. You need to do anything but let them go. They're eating all of our crops. They're causing all these problems. And so that was, you know, the window for me. Then I ended up spending a year in St. Kitts and Nevis studying monkey crop damage patterns, farmer perceptions of monkeys. And so my whole dissertation was about that. And then my husband went to boarding school and always wanted to work at a boarding school. And so after doing field work, which was kind of my motivate, like we're moving, then it was like, it's your turn. Where should we go next? And we ended up at the Trinity Polling School, which is like 35 minutes south of here. And so that's where I finished my PhD. I had a couple kids. I was working part-time adjuncting at Marist College for a few years and wasn't getting a tenure track position. I got, you know, pretty close a few times and just was super frustrated with the academic world. And so we decided to go back to St. Kitts and Nevis in 2018. And we ended up there for 4 years. I ended up landing this amazing job. I became the national coordinator of an invasive alien species project. Oh. So the country decided that the monkeys were the most problematic invasive species on the island. And because I'm the only person who had really ever done detailed research on the free-ranging monkeys, I landed this amazing job. So then I got to do 4 years of full-time research. And then I always knew it was a 4-year job. My job was ending. My husband was super frustrated with the private school that he was working at down there. And so then again, it's like, okay, where do you want to go next? And obviously, given my primatological interests, and I kind of decided, you know what, like I'll keep looking at the college jobs, but I don't want my whole life to revolve around, you know, a visiting position here for a year and a visiting position over there. I have 2 kids. I want none of that. So I ended up here, and I've, over the years, picked up more and more responsibilities. When I first started, I was part-time. I was really hired to teach independent science research and do dorm duty. And then over the years, I've picked up all of these other things. So I'm full-time now, but that took a couple of years to happen. So what's cool about the 4-year research job was that I have all of this data. And so now I'm teaching and publishing all of the work that I did over those years. So I'm, along with my students, making revisions to papers. I'm working on a textbook with 3 colleagues on primate behavior. So I'm kind of walking the walk along with them. So when I rip up their papers, I say, look, it's happening to me too. So I think it's cool for them to see, you know, someone doing what they're teaching. Long answer, but
no, that's great. That's a whole lot of stuff. That's very cool. Interesting path. So do you find that studying primate behavior helps you to understand high school students?
People ask me that a lot. I think technology has changed the game. You don't have primates that are, you know, warped minds and screen addicted, which I think is some of the biggest issues that we have with teenagers. But in terms of, I mean, I'm an anthropologist too. So my PhD is really in more of like the hard sciences, biological anthropology. So like I teach human evolution and genetics and all those things. But once I started doing field work, I became really more interested in the human side of things. So I do primate behavior. I follow monkeys around. I, you know, do scan sampling and all of that. But I'm way more interested in like the dynamic of how the primates are impacting the people around them and how the people are impacting the primates and what that means for real world conservation and management. A lot of the research that I do is weird because I'm dealing with an overpopulated, and that's a little bit of a subjective designation, but an overpopulated group of primates. But most of my colleagues are trying to figure out how to conserve the species that they study. So there's a small group of us that study, we call them synanthropic primates, right? Primates that are very happy and thriving in human-dominated spaces. So it's like a unique place to be. I'm not really sure where I was going with that, but
that's cool though.
Puts me in a weird category.
Yeah, no,
and
that's
therefore,
weird.
Because I'm paying attention to people, I think I'm tuned into people in general, right? Boarding school world is weird. There's a lot of extremely privileged kids here. So I'm interested in the dynamics of what it's like when you're raised in that way. Having children that will go here who are in this like intermediate place between the privileged kids and the scholarship kids, I think about just country club culture and boarding school culture, and I'm super interested in it, but I don't know how much it means that I understand my students any better than I would otherwise.
But I mean, no, I think about that stuff every time I'm here or even just talk to Dan about anything or whatever, because like, when I first heard that there was a zoo at a high school, I'm like, that is literally the worst idea ever. Right? And then I found out it's an AZA accredited zoo, and I was like, okay,
how are they pulling that off?
Not the worst idea ever. And now I've been here a bunch, and I've talked to a bunch of students over the years and stuff, and they're not normal high school kids. And I say that in a great way. Yep. They're brilliant. They're wonderful. Yep. You can converse with them. This last AZA conference, I ate lunch with the head student curators and Jess and Kylene.
And Ingrid and William and Milo.
Yeah.
No, Milo or Hector. Yeah, Hector graduated. Yeah, Milo. Yeah. They're brothers.
And fair. Yeah. and it was such like normal, like it was me sitting, like hanging out with like my buddies. Like it was cool. Like,
You're super mature and that's comfortable with adults.
Awesome.
I mean, I will be like teaching in my professional clothing and standing up in front of the kids. And then like 4 hours later, I'll be like in my my like athletic gear, coaching them on the field. And then they'll see me like in my pajamas on dorm duty. They'll see me like hanging out with my kids at the dining hall. And, when I was in high school, I went to public school. Like if I saw my teachers outside of school, it was like they were an alien. Mm-hmm. It's just so weird. Like, oh my God, they go grocery shopping too, and these kids, they see us in all the hats we wear in all of our forms, which I think is huge.
Yeah, that's really cool. It is interesting. I also do wonder though. I mean, I do. I've talked to a lot of kids here that come from some serious privilege, like you said. And they're like, yeah, this has really inspired me to want to become a zookeeper. And I'm like, and how many parents hate that? Or do they know what the economic realities of that are? And I mean, obviously I'm a fan of zookeepers. That's why I do this podcast. But like, it's interesting, and are mom and dad going to pay for that lifestyle? Or are you going to be, how passionate about it are you? I think it's an interesting, question.
It is. And I get questions like, what was your trajectory? Mm-hmm. Would you recommend people get PhDs, right? And that's a really hard question to answer because, I mean, I love what I know. I love what I do. I love being able to write and use my brain in that way. I know that like when my kids are out of my house, I'm still going to be like, have a passion and be productive in my research and all of that. You were talking about the challenges of like wanting to be a zookeeper, right? So like for me, I always tell the kids, how much support do you have, right? Through family, through, like obviously eventually maybe a partner. And if I hadn't had a partner who had not a very well paying, but like a consistent job, while I was having small children, trying to get a PhD, and then for my field work, for my dissertation, I didn't have funding for that. So he, solely supported us on a tropical island that imports almost all of its food and everything is wildly expensive, so it was like really hard. But I'm so passionate and happy and fired up, and I don't need like a lot of money. I need a good quality of life and comforts in a low stress life. What is the priority for you? Do you want to have like solid job security and a guaranteed, $200,000 income? Then maybe you need to be a vet, right? But do you really want to do that? Do you want to be dealing with sick animals? Do you want to be doing surgeries? Are you more interested in behavior? I had a student who's at Cornell now, and she's trying to decide whether she wants to go like the vet route or the environmental science route. And that was kind of what I brought to her attention. Like, you have to think about like what fires you up, what's motivating you, how much do you care about a guaranteed job when you get out? How much would it upset you if you have to move back home for a couple of years and work your way up and all of that, right? I had to kind of do those things, and I feel like it was worth it. But if I were having to solely support myself, I would have been screwed.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It's a hard trajectory.
Yeah,
there we
very
go.
much so. Yeah, very good. So let's talk about the independent research project science nerd thing that you do. Yeah. I think that's the official title. So just in general, what is that for the students here?
Sure.
All right, we'll be back after this quick break.
Please join me for the Nature Disturbed podcast, a podcast about the good, the offensive, and the confusing parts of the animal kingdom, from the sewers of Florida searching for alligators. Oh no, did I forget to put the bins out? To the surface of Mars, investigating the possibility of life beyond Earth. Sorry, I had some bubbles lodged in my throat. I said, to the bottom of the Mariana Trench, all while interviewing scientists about their research along the way. Do you like comedy, whimsical storytelling, and learning about the natural world? If not, then you'll hate the Nature Disturbed podcast.
My goal is for them to dip their toe in what real research is like in all of the ways. So a lot of them have a pretty good handle on literature, for example. But what we do is we spend the first September and October. So the first 2 months, they're essentially deciding what they want to study. And then I'm helping them determine whether it's feasible and reasonable to do in the amount of time that we have. And then they read a ton of literature. So they have to do a really long, detailed, annotated bibliography on whatever the subject is that they're doing. So they read at least 10 sources, and I really encourage them to do more. So they're hopefully becoming a little mini expert on that subject. And then they have to tell me, what's the gap in the literature that you're hoping to fill? What is your main research question through that? And then what are you hypothesizing? And all of that has to be rooted in literature. So sometimes kids want to do some really crazy thing that no one's ever done. And that's not an option. You need to have a strong literature base. You're not a PhD student. You're a high school student. Let's be real. And then we spend a good month writing a detailed research proposal. So they have a background section with all of the literature that culminates in, this is the gap. This is why I'm the perfect person to fill it. This is what I hypothesize. And then their methods. How are they going to go about answering that question? What type of data are they going to collect? How are they going to store that data, right? What is your data collection sheet going to look like? And then we work with our AP Stats class. So I'm not very mathy oriented. I'm a field biologist. And so I always collaborate with statisticians because that's a huge part of research is, collecting enough data so that you can say whether your conditions or whatever it is that you're studying, whether you're seeing a significant difference in these patterns. So we go through that. And then they get 4 months to collect data. So November, December, January, February, and sometimes the first week of March, they're out collecting data. So our school block system is really wonky, but they get 70 minutes, essentially 2 or 3 times a week, depending on the week, dedicated to our class. So the idea is that they're going to then, rather than meet with me, I'm not holding your hand through this, they go and do whatever I've approved for them to do. And then they send me weekly progress reports. We meet as necessary. And then in the spring, we have a 3-week spring break in March. So they have to kind of stop collecting data at that time. And then when we come back from break at the end of March, then it's full steam ahead. We have a science symposium this year. It's on May 1st. It's usually that first Friday in May. And so for that next 4 or 5 weeks, they are analyzing their data, their figures, tables, stats, and then figuring out what does this mean, again, in the body of the literature that they read. And sometimes that means looking up more literature because they're not sure what this means. And has anyone else found a result like that? And so they do a final detailed paper. They do a presentation to their peers. And then we do posters, conference-style posters. So they get the experience of presenting at a conference and then also doing the poster session at a conference. It's a really amazing class. I'm super proud to teach it. I didn't create it. It was created by someone a few years ahead of me, but I think I've taken it to a higher level with the stats and the posters and things like that, so that by the time these kids go, something else I should say is a good chunk of kids do fecal hormone analysis and sometimes saliva hormone analysis. So I can give you some examples of projects kids are doing this year, but usually a handful of the class will do hormone analysis. And so me and Kylene and Jess and Alan really hold their hands through this really many hour-long process of extracting and analyzing, doing a hormone assay, the amount of assays in each of their samples. And so based on their research questions, they can say these conditions gave the animal significantly higher or lower stress levels. So, for enrichment, we can say, does this enrichment actually, well, we always do behavior too, but like, do their stress-related behaviors go down with this enrichment? Right. Does the cortisol level reflect what we're seeing in their behavior?
Very cool. Yeah, I know. And I love that the research is applicable when it's done like at the zoo beyond just like, we did this research to do the research.
Yeah,
like
they have to talk about the significance of this research. What does it mean in a broader context?
Yeah, that's really cool.
Always with any project that's done in the zoo, it has to do with zoo animal welfare.
I remember a couple years ago hearing about a project, I don't know if this was when you were here or not, but where somebody was figuring out whether bringing in snow leopards would bother the red pandas because they are a natural predator, but obviously Shu has never met a snow leopard. Yeah. And so they were getting fur samples and fecal samples and stuff of snow leopards sent in, and then testing, doing the stress levels.
That was not while I was here, but it's just the type of work that we did.
I talk about that study with panda keepers all the time. And I can't believe that it's a high school kid that I'm talking about like it's, some major, but it's major science. And it has actually, I've talked to multiple facilities where they've worried about like, we're bringing in a predator type. I'm like, well, here's what I can tell you. I know of one study that was done at the Trevor Zoo. And I've had this conversation.
I'm going to look this up real quick because I give the students a list. So I have at the very least, I have a list of all the projects that have ever been done under ISR. So if we search panda, effects of snow leopard stimulants on red panda corticosteroid levels, Tiffany Hatfield. I know that name.
I actually interviewed
2017 to 2018. Anyway, I want the paper. I want to know what they found. I want the data.
Yeah.
So I can I'll look into that. That was 2017, 2018. So that was the year before I came. Okay. No, I lied. I was 2018 with St. Kitts. So I didn't get here till 2022 was my first year.
We are friends on the socials.
Me. Yes, I followed you last night.
No. Oh, Tiffany.
Yeah, ask her if she has a copy of her paper.
But yeah, I think studies like that are it's like I said, it's just ridiculous to me that I'm quoting a high school kid, but like ridiculous in the best way. Yep. Having met them, it no longer even surprises me. The other thing that I do find funny, going back to the kind of privilege and then like being a zookeeper, is that, especially for the younger students, they have to come here for part of it for the community service stuff. And I do notice every once in a while you get the person who's like here in like probably all designer clothing and dressed to impress. And then they're scooping poop. And I'm like, this is fantastic. I love it so much. I was walking around today with Dan looking at some of that, and there were a couple of students that I was like, I'm guessing you're not going to be back, but like, that's cool. At least you're here doing the thing, and I respect it. And
to do it.
And every one of them was doing the thing. That's the really cool part. Like, the curators had it under control, and I didn't see anyone, like, I did group projects in high school and in college, and I was often the only one who did this stuff,
Yep.
And to see, even the people who were done up to the nines were still shoveling the poo.
I know.
But so what are some of the projects that are ongoing at the zoo right now?
Yeah. Okay. So we have 7 kids in the class this year, which is really nice. It's a nice small group. For the zoo, I actually think we have 5 projects that are in the zoo. Let me just pull this up really quick.
I assume that all of the projects would have to be relatively closer, like around the school, or else how else would you get your 70 minutes of research?
It's true. But like we have, so for example, non-zoo projects this year, we have a student who's interested in ants. So he's doing his whole project on ants, and there's like a very commonly used insecticide. And he, like, for the broader impacts, it's like, disease spread and resistance. He's going to test how the fungus essentially kills the ants. He's going to have a control. Then he's going to have one where he puts the fungus in the water, one where he puts it in the food, one where he puts it directly on an ant. And he's going to monitor like the way that it affects the colony over time, right? Then we have another non-zoo project is looking at crayfish abundance in the waters around school.
Okay.
And looking at their abundance in relation to like different water quality measures like pH and turbidity and
so
really
you have
interesting.
Two non-zoo projects that are both animal related.
But they're still animal
That's
related.
amazing.
Yep.
that's why I was laughing. I think I can see the impact of the zoo.
But last year we had I mean, I've had students do like bacterial abundance in relation to the zoo, actually, doing transects around the zoo and seeing if we see any relationship between bacterial abundance and distance from the zoo. I'm trying to think of some other. I had a student do a whole research project on sense of belonging of our students of color. That was a really cool quantitative and qualitative project. So there are non-zoo projects for sure, but this year is a big one. So Max, who I know you've met, Amsterdam, he's been back and forth, but he's going to look at, as you know, our otters don't get along, and so they have alternating access to the river. He's going to look at, on the days that they're stuck up top, if their stress levels are higher. And then so that would be the control where they just have their normal up and down. And then he's going to look at, I think, 3 or 4 different types of enrichment when they are stuck up top and see which of those enrichments reduces their stress the most.
Nice.
Yep.
That's
so
cool.
He'll be doing behavior and stress. Then we have, we have a student that's doing another non-zoo project. She's looking at illusions. So like tricking your mind with different illusions and looking at heart and brain responses to that. Will Grayling, have you met? He's another zoo curator. He's studying the bintrongs. So he's doing something similar to that panda study where he's going to be doing scent enrichment. And he's had one of the things I make the kids do is reach out to 3 experts on their topic. And he's had a lot of success with finding other zoo bintrong people to talk to him.
So I'm a bintrong guy, as you can see from my computer. Bintrongs are one of the animals like in my podcast logo and everything. First thing I wanted to do today, even with a red panda cup here, was go see the bints.
Yeah. Because they're new.
Pardon?
They're new.
Yeah, and they're exciting and they're bintrongs. And I always get to spend time with red pandas. I love it when I get binturong time. But I will tell you, binturong people are the most I've literally had people burst in when I was interviewing somebody else and be like, John, hi, you don't know me, but I know, I listen to the podcast and I know you love bintrongs and I'm the bintrong keeper and do you want to come meet my bintrongs? On multiple occasions. It is one of the coolest communities.
They're really the wildest animals.
They're so weird.
They're so weird. I love them.
Weird.
Yeah.
I love them so much.
Yeah, so he's already had 2 really nice long Zoom meetings with different experts, getting different bits of feedback on it. And so he discovered from his last interview that there's a scent. It's it can be powdered where it's the bintrong's popcorny smell. And obviously you can add water and spray it around. Cause I was wanting him to look at the effect of other bintrong urine as, an enrichment. Does that actually stress them out? Make them, we want them to be moving around their enclosure more. Whatever. Anyway, so he's going to test different olfactory enrichments and look at the effect on stress. He's not actually going to do fecal hormones because a lot of his work is going to have to be through cameras and stuff at night. So I think a huge chunk of his time is going to be spent scoring videos from cameras.
Sure.
And then we have Ingrid Schmidt is going to do our wallabies. As far as I know, we haven't really had any other wallaby studies. So she's actually going to look at the effect of seasonal affect disorder lamps on their behavior in the winter. So in different intervals, she'll have sad lamps in each of the 3 holding areas inside the enclosure and see if it increases their affiliative behaviors, movements, that kind of stuff. We're still narrowing down exactly what behavior she wants to pay attention to. And then Sophie Zhu is doing the red panda study. Do you know about this one? Has anyone told you about it?
I don't think so.
Okay, so she is going to look at, there's a spectrum of bamboo that they get, so from the minimum amount that's required to, the most that's required. So she's going to look she's going to weigh different amounts of bamboo in the enclosure. So she's going to have different categories of how much bamboo that they get and look at the effect of that on their stress and behavior. So it's both a food and an enrichment item. And so we have different periods of time with different windows, the proportion of bamboo in their diet. So I think we're going to put it down to the minimum and then we're going to go back up to the most and just see how it affects them.
Nice. That's very cool. That's very, very
That's
cool.
this year. This is a nice small cohort. It's only 7, which is really nice for me because I work them really hard.
That's good though. That's important. Yeah. I know that Lucy is very into bamboo and Zhu is pretty good as well with it. But one of the things that I'm interested in, and I've actually been talking to a scientist about recently, is there's a lot of problem with renal failure in pandas, especially around 3 to 4 years old in human care. And we don't have the research to know if it's also in the wild or not. And so my theory is that having met so many pandas in human care, I've met over 50, a lot don't like bamboo and are more interested in leaf eater biscuits. And even the ones that do like bamboo, a lot of their diet is like 50% or more biscuit and fruit. And then, 50%, when in the wild, it's 90 to 95% bamboo. Right. And I am by no means an expert, but it seems to me like that might be a thing. And there was just a study done with tree kangaroos recently that was looking at a lack of success in the breeding in the population. And the scientist, Diana at Cleveland Metro Park Zoo, switched their tree kangaroo diets to be much more what you would expect in the wild. Yeah. And they had breeding success. And the other ones that they have tested also had breeding success. So not the same as kidney disease, but same kind of idea. And I'm like, I wonder, this is interesting.
I mean, if their bodies are made to eat predominantly bamboo and they're eating something completely different.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's all so interesting. Sure. Yeah. And they're red pandas are so weird because they're carnivores internally, but then
this is what I was reading about with Sophie's paper.
It's really strange, and so are they meant to? It goes to a lot of weird places.
Yeah,
but
I'm sure it has to do with their evolutionary history and then current environments.
Yeah,
and they maybe don't line up very well.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Yeah, but that's really cool. So what? I know you haven't been here a super long time, but you've had students graduate the cohort and go on. Have you gotten any feedback from them in like real life experience, or like do any of them just still curse your name to this day?
I don't know. I think it's a good question. You might have to go find a few of my graduates, but I know this morning I was talking to Ingrid, who's another one of the curators and is in ISR and advanced bio. And she just was at Cornell yesterday for a revisit and was chatting with one of my former students who made sure to say hi to me. And she's the one that I chatted with maybe a year after she graduated about whether she wanted to go the vet route or the environmental science route. I have another student from last year who's at Tufts now and who's texted me multiple times like, hey, we're talking about this thing in this class, and we're talking about this thing in this class, and I feel so well prepared. I mean, that to me is like the best thing that I could ever hear. A lot of that is from my advanced bio class, though, not necessarily ISR. So I don't think I've really heard directly from kids about like ISR and how it has been helpful in their college experiences, but I know it will. I mean, anytime that they're asked to do research, like I have my kids this year, they have to download Zotero, like a bibliographic tool, and just things like that where these kids are going to be like scrambling to figure out, how to cite their papers, and my kids are going to be like, oh, here's how you do that. So, but I like to think that, when some of my first kids are like coming back for their 5-year reunion, that I'll get a lot of that, like, oh my God, that helped me so much. I like to think so. We'll see.
That's really cool. I do know that a lot of the students that have been here stay here. Like they come back regularly, they visit, they stay in touch with people. I think one of the students who graduated last year or 2 years ago was hanging out with the current students at AZA because she also went back. Maybe,
No, Jamie Cadis.
Yes, Jamie. Oh my God, yeah. Jamie was on 2 years ago at AZA, and what a
I love her.
Star. I was actually, I was bummed when I saw that she was at AZA that I hadn't had a chance to say hi. Because again, just
her
an amazing
ISR was
kid.
on our wolves.
Nice.
She looked at the effect of breeding season separation on their stress and behavior. So they didn't want them to have more pups. And so they separated the males and females. And so she did fecal hormone and behavior stuff with our wolves. We also had a student, my first year, I think it was, do the effect of live prey on our wolf behavior. So she got rabbits and released them into the enclosure. That was such a cool study.
Nice.
Obviously, people had opinions about it, but I loved it. And they did like all kinds of super cool species-specific behavior that we hadn't seen them do before. Honestly, I'm sad that we didn't keep it up when we should.
That's really interesting. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I always find it amusing that it is the Venn diagram is not a full circle, but it is largely they should all be released back to the wild people who also don't want you to do live prey, which if they were released into the wild, they would go and eat the bunnies. Like
It's really tough for me. I mean, as somebody who, again, studies like an overpopulated primate and has recommended monkey control in some places, it's nuanced.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really hard.
It's really, having become, and I loathe the word, but with a social media following of over 140,000 people, I'm an influencer in this world, which is weird. And I don't like what that word normally means. but I have a lot of contact with a lot of people who reach out about my content and are in the anti-zoo world or whatever. And the number in 5.5 years of the podcast and 7 years of having an Instagram, the number of conservationists who have brought complaints to me are one former conservationist who specifically doesn't think that elephants should be in zoos, but otherwise completely supports accredited zoos.
Okay.
And then one person who claimed to be a conservationist, but I couldn't find anything about them. And they were messaging me from their account that is a stuffed animal with no real name on it. So I will take their word at it and say that they're the one who may really be one. Right. I don't think so. They did have some, like, we had a high level conversation. I will give them that. It was the most intelligent conversation I've had with a stuffed animal, to be perfectly honest with you. But it was a decent enough where I was like, okay, you may be in this world. But it is amazing to me because, like, just percentage wise, you would think I'd have a few by now, you know, and it was literally the stuffed animal one, and then one person who very specifically elephants know everything else. You know,
do you agree with that? The elephant thing?
Stuff. I don't. I've not done a super ton of research into it, but I have done a lot of looking at the care that they receive in facilities, including spending time with Mike McClure, who is he's the elephant foot whisperer, basically. Okay. And he goes around and trains people how to take care of their feet and reshape them and everything. And most of the argument that I see about the elephants in general is about how far they move in a day. Yeah. And I hear that. And I do wonder about that. But I also wonder if sometimes we worry a little too much about natural behaviors being replicated in a zoo, because I can tell you that, and I know there is a difference between, you know, captivity, I don't use that word often, but we will use it for now, and domestication. But I will tell you that I know what the natural history of humans is. I have studied that. You have studied it far more than me. And you know what we didn't do? Grocery stores and Netflix. Yeah. But as soon as the opportunity presented, we did. And so, like, we know that part of why elephants move so much is because if they stay in one place, they will destroy all the resources, right? So do they need to walk as much as they do? Or do the resources around them need them to?
Determine it.
And I don't have that answer, you know? And I don't know that anyone has an answer right now. But I think it's the nuance of it. It's not intelligent to say, well, elephants walk X number of miles a day in the wild, so if you can't do that in a zoo, they shouldn't be there.
That shouldn't be the end all be.
No.
Right? It has, I mean, it's tricky as somebody who has done a lot of field research, but who's done a lot of, I took care of laboratory mice for many years, and I've seen, biomedical research on monkeys in St. Kitts and Nevis, I've seen things I don't really love. And like right now, like we need to improve the space for some of the animals here. And that's of course on the docket, which is great. I'm so excited, right? But these places can always be better, but does that mean that they shouldn't exist? And to your point, there's a spectrum, right? So some zoos are really bad. Some zoos are amazing. So we can't lump them all into one group. It just doesn't make sense.
That's why I focus on accredited zoos. It's not perfect in any regards. I've been to some unaccredited zoos that are quite nice.
Right.
I've been to ones that I literally, my wife and I were considering trying to kidnap a binturong, not as a joke even, but it was in such bad conditions, and I knew other zoos and places, and I was like, do we risk doing this? Like we were both teared up at a binturong habitat, and I normally am teared up at a binturong habitat for good reasons,
for that reason.
Not the bad ones, But I did love, I don't know if you saw this quote. I'm assuming with your line of work that you've heard of Jane Goodall.
Yes, indeed.
And right before she passed, she had this, it's a long quote, but I love throwing it on the pod. This is going to be like my third time. But she said, I'm always being asked again and again, Jane, what do you think of zoos? Groups who believe all zoos should be closed clearly have not spent the time I have out in the wild. They haven't seen the threats destroying chimpanzee habitat. They don't understand what it's like to watch a chimp struggle, wounded and lame from a wire snare. But I do. I remember sitting with a group of chimps in an American zoo once. They had a really nice enclosure, and I was watching the adults groom each other and the young ones play. As I watched, I remember thinking of the chimpanzee groups I had seen in the wild who are living day to day in fear. Put yourself in the position of chimpanzees for a minute. A chimp living in a zoo where people know them, love them, understand them, and protect them, or a chimp in the wild who may have lost their mother the week before watching another member of the troop as they're wounded by a bullet from a poacher? Which would you rather be? I'd rather be in the group in the zoo. And she said that, like, that came out like literally a week or two before she died. And I was like, thank you.
Yeah.
That is like the best gift to have left. And I've said that to a lot of the people. I love drop. I have that in my favorites. And I'm like, so before we go in this conversation, before you say you're an expert, I'm an expert, whatever, this is what Jane Goodall thought.
Yeah.
Let's start there and then we can converse further, you know?
I just think even like the term wild, I don't like it. I don't use it because...
You're now the second person I've heard say that.
Oh, interesting.
I'm intrigued by that.
And I'm not... So like I'm working on this textbook with 3 primatology colleagues, and they're all like a decade further in their careers than me. And this was something we had to really like hash out in terms of like the book and how we were going to use it. You know, as an ethnoprimatologist, like with a lot of anthropology background, like a big part of cultural anthropology is pushing against the nature-culture boundary. So Westerners, and myself included before I got into the field, you have this idea that like animals are over here in the forest and then people are over here in the villages. And then when you get into the real world where wild animals live, wild confers this idea of like an animal in untouched, pristine wilderness with no human contact. When you watch a nature documentary, there's never people in it, which is not real life. And so when people say wild primates, people are thinking primates that have never been around people, but you're literally studying them. You're following them around. Are they really wild the way people imagine the word wild to be used? And so I hate the way it conjures up this false idea of what like nature, natural spaces are and what wild animals are doing and their lives are like. So I say free ranging. Now, some people, and primatologists included, have an issue with that because they think of like Cayo Santiago. Do you know that in Puerto Rico?
No.
It's this like really longstanding colony of rhesus monkeys that are like on an island and they're not in any enclosure, but they're like, they've been studied. We know everyone who's mom, who's dad, who's offspring, you know, like all this information about every animal. And then there's other spaces like in Texas, like certain sanctuaries and places where, you know, it doesn't look like a zoo, but it's not like wild in quotes either. And they think of free ranging for that. But to me, I think free ranging makes a lot of sense because it's something you can actually define. Nothing is stopping them from going anywhere.
Right.
They are out in, you know, space and nothing is restricting their movement. That's what because I think there's a spectrum. Sometimes they're mostly in the forest and not really coming near places. But then what about city monkeys? Are they wild?
Right.
They live in cities. They rely like almost entirely on food that's provisioned to them. So I just think free ranging makes a lot more sense.
So I'm curious. I'm going to push back on that a little bit if that's okay.
Sure.
So red pandas in Nepal will not cross roads. This has been shown study and study again. Okay. Even though they could, even though there's not a ton of traffic, they are too afraid to do it. Okay. And so are you free ranging if you are like if you're not able to, you know, or even taking it a step further than that, if you've got further habitat fragmentation than just roads. If you've got the stuff we have with logging where there are huge areas, are they truly free ranging or are they confined?
That's a good question.
And again, just trying to, think through it because
I think that so there are ways outside of enclosures that we can restrict their movement. Would you call them wild?
I don't know what the word wild means anymore. And you saw me getting very excited when you were saying that. I was literally like dancing. I looked like I had to pee. I don't have to pee, but I have said for the longest time that I think one of the biggest false steps in the whole nature movement, conservation, call it whatever you will, right, and it was so well-intentioned, but are the documentaries, especially from like the 80s and 90s, like a lot of the David Attenborough stuff, and total respect to the man.
Just African savanna and acacia trees. Oh my God, and no people.
It's the most beautiful thing in the world. And you only see animals get eaten if it's about a predator. If it's the prey, you see every good escape ever, right? Because they will watch 20 gazelle get eaten, and the one that gets away, that's the one that they build the whole documentary around, the survivor of the savannah or whatever. And so are the animals wild Well, yes. Now, when you, again, I agree that it's very blurred lines, right? Especially, monkeys, screw monkeys in the city, squirrels in the city, right? Like even stuff we all see. It's a really strange dynamic.
So do we say like not captive? Because I don't like using captive as like the definitive,
No,
like,
right. Well, I don't even like the word captive. I've actually said it on this podcast for the first time in like 2 years now, just because it made sense with the example I was giving. But like, I always say,
see what I'm saying? Like not restricted, their movement. But like your point is a good one. Like they're restricted behaviorally, but not physically.
Right. Or sometimes physically even, because you can't get out of, if there are certain species that cannot
that are only
leave.
arboreal.
Yeah.
Right. That cannot leave trees.
Yeah. And so because that's my concern is your concern with wild is my concern with free range. Because you know what I think? The same reason I think captive is a problem, not because captivity in a zoo is bad, but because most people think captive means like if you said someone's a captive, that means they're
like
held against their will and they're being treated poorly. And exactly. Yeah. And I think the same thing when I think free range, what do I immediately go to? Free range chickens, free range, pork, poultry, all that stuff. And that kind of implies like inhuman control, you know what I mean? Like that's where my mind goes. And again, you've got the experience.
We need a new term.
We do.
We really do.
Yeah, I agree. Because the wild is not wild.
It just doesn't have a clear definition.
No. Yeah.
And even like I used the term conflict earlier in the discussion, how I was interested in the conflict between humans and primates. I try to avoid that even. I do use it in papers and stuff, but it's conflict for us, but it's not really conflict for them. Right? Or even like crop, what do people say? Crop raiding. They're just eating. So we'll try to switch and say like crop foraging, just like foraging. Yeah. Right? Like the antagonism is what's felt on the human side. But when you say they're raiding your crops, you're implying like this conscious antagonism on the part of the animals, which we most of the time is unvalidated. Right. No, absolutely. Yeah. That's very much, the raiding or like even like shark infested waters. No, that's their home. Right? We're the ones swimming in it. Where it's human infested waters to be like, that's what that word means. True. We're the invasive species. So true. Right? Yep. Yeah. I wrote a whole paper about the problem with like, not the problem, but like the challenges with the term invasive. And like the species that I studied, the monkeys have been on St. Kitts and Nevis for 400 years. Like at what point does something become part of an ecosystem? And the way that we use like military language to talk about like invasion and, it's all super messed up. There's so much nuance in there. Like when does something assimilate or, what's the difference between native and local and indigenous and, all of those things are not clearly defined. Right. Great, huge problems when it comes to interpreting what people are saying. Yeah. And sometimes animals come into a place and then fill an ecological niche that is maybe otherwise gone. And like, it's really, and do you need to conserve them if there's not proof that it was humans that led to that issue? And this is some... Primates are huge seed dispersers. Yeah. Yeah, I have, these are the thoughts that go through my mind at night. Those things where it's like, the meme where it's like a woman, a man in bed, and she's like, he's probably thinking about other women. That's me. And I'm like, man, is the word wild acceptable? Yes, and what does wild even mean? Oh my God, I'm exactly the same. Truly. Yep. Yeah, that's awesome. This has really gone off the rails in the best way. I love just having philosophical chats on here. It's so much fun. Same. But is there anything else you want to say about the projects, the students, anything? No, I just think I'm super proud to work here where these kids can get really hands-on experience with what the scientific method and process is like and how we interpret data and how, as an anthropologist, I often talk about like how a lot of quantitative science like will... you'll get your data and they'll be like, oh, and then you like change your hypothesis and you change your whole background section. You know what I mean? Like acknowledging for the kids that like some science is subjective, right? Like we are humans and we are influenced by the environments that we grew up in. So the questions we even want to ask is part of our culture. And, like just letting them understand that it's not like science is absolute, right? There is some, you have to really think about the context and, it's not super clean and simple, like these categories that we're talking about. So these kids get to experience that in real time.
Which is so important right now, because people, there's always the trust the science, and then people are like, oh, but the science changed. It's like, well, yeah, but you can still trust the science like to a point, but well, no, if science changes, then it's wrong.
You should be more concerned about things that they are apparently absolute and unchanging, which we know is just not true. And you want a field that's constantly trying to learn new things and adjust its previous, literature or whatever it might be to accommodate our new knowledge. But yeah, it's often used to discredit the process, which is...
So I have an interesting question for you that, again, we're going to go philosophical here. You have specifically called yourself multiple things. Anthropologist, primatologist, fun at parties. No, wait, you didn't. No, but you used a lot of these terms.
Ethnoprimatologist.
Yes, excuse me. And as you have used them, you even mentioned that, like, you said at one point that, like, as you went to school, you became an ethnoprimatologist or whatever your exact phrasing was. When do you think, in the grand scheme of things, you can call yourself a thing? Because, and the reason I'm asking this, right, this isn't just a philosophical question. It is, but I know so many people who struggle with this. And I am now part of 2 conservation organizations, as well as having helped with other ones. But, like, am a leader, one of the leaders of one of them, and a part of another one that I might be stepping into a leadership role into. And I finally, the other day, put conservationist on my profile for the first time, because I've been doing work in this field for a couple of years now, but I don't have a degree in it. I'm not a doctor of conservation. And the imposter syndrome, especially as a person who came to this field as a professional drummer and then started a podcast and didn't even know what, like, accreditation or training was. It's real. But I also talk to so many, like, keepers and stuff that struggle with, like, can I call myself a conservationist? Can I call myself an expert in this animal because, I studied biology, but I've worked with this species for 4 years and blah. And, what are your thoughts on that?
It's really fascinating. I don't have a good answer, I don't think. I think in the same way that, like, race is a self-determined category, right? Like when you're applying for things or whatever, like no admissions person's gonna be like, are you really Black? You know what I mean? Like you classify yourself the way that you see yourself. And I think that's part of it. I do think there are some people who classify themselves as things that they shouldn't. So there's that. I obviously think, degrees really help. Have you contributed to your field though? You don't only contribute to your field through scientific papers and books and stuff. You're contributing to your field by disseminating scientific information to the public. So to me, like, that is justification for that classification. So to me, I think it's more like, how much of your life do you dedicate to something? How much of your energy are you putting into something? Like, are you putting it out in the world in some way that's productive, that's contributing? Like, for example, there's this guy in St. Kitts and Nevis who, I don't actually know what his degree was in, but he came in and he was mostly working on Nevis, and I mostly started in St. Kitts, and he interviewed me a bunch, and I had some problems with what he was doing. Like, he was just making these, like, some grandiose assumptions about things that you could do, like doing feeding stations with no control and saying he could, like, sterilize the monkeys with, like, poppy seeds or something, like, really with no... Anyway, and then he called himself an ethnoprimatologist, and my other colleague was like, how do you feel about this? And I was like... I don't know. Like, I don't agree that he is that. But to me, that was because, not just because he didn't have a degree, but because he didn't understand, like, the literature and, like, what goes into that classification. So, I mean, for me, I would say I'm primarily an anthropologist. That's, like, the biggest umbrella hat that I wear. That's 4 different subfields. It covers, biological and cultural and even, like, linguistics and archaeology. Like, I have training in all of those areas. So, like, broadly, I would be that. And then a little, like, smaller umbrella would be primatology. And then the most specific umbrella would be ethnoprimatology, right? Like, I think we can usually classify ourselves in multiple ways depending on who we're talking to. I wouldn't call myself, like, a conservationist, but a lot of the research that I do really strongly applies to conservation work, because much of what I'm doing is talking about fully doing ethnographic research and engaging with local communities. And in my case, it has to do with what are the best management strategies? How do we, like, strike a theoretical balance where people can grow their own food, but the monkeys also have space to eat and live and be comfortable, because they deserve to be there too. So I don't know. I don't think it's an easy clear line where you like become something. But as I said earlier, I think it really has to do with how much of your energy and time you're dedicating to something and how much of your work is like being disseminated and built upon in whatever field that you're studying.
Cool. Good answer. Then the last two questions. Is there a conservation organization that you would like to give a shout out to?
That bracelet that you're wearing, my kids have a couple of those, and I don't remember where it's from.
Follow.
Yeah. That's really cool. Again, my work is mostly in management. How do we control? And, a lot of what I talk about is like the human primate interface, right? And in St. Kitts and Nevis right now, the Venn diagram is almost full, right? Like, how do we create it so that they're like human spaces where like monkeys aren't coming into your yard and eating your crops or like pooping on your picnic table where you want to go and eat, and then not entering your farms, but that you have these other spaces where they can be seen and respected, like trying to figure out where those lines are. So I don't really engage with conservation organizations very much, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, I would say any ones that are really doing ethnographic work on the ground, not just going in and doing an interview or doing a survey for a month, but like spending at least a year on the ground, doing what local people do, learning from them, asking questions, just sitting around and observing and trying to figure out, like I have a couple of papers I could send you. One of them is like one of my favorite papers, and it talks about like tiger conservation. And, you have this huge like WWF insignia and everything, like save the tiger. And then you have these people who like can't even get rice. They have to wear like a mask on the back of their heads that looks like they're looking at you because they thrive on surprise, right? Like they're literally like fearful for their lives to go out and like get food and make. And then you have these conservationists coming in that are like, save the tiger, right? So you need someone who's doing like real ethnographic work on the ground. Any conservation organization that makes that a priority, I would support.
Sweet. I love that. And then it's time now, don't you know? We've come to the end of the show. But there's one tale left to go. You're gonna laugh and say, oh no. It's time for the Rossifari poop story.
Right before I saw you, I definitely had poop on my hands from the kinkajous.
That's true. You literally wouldn't take my hand.
Yeah. Today.
That's fair. That's fair. That's just life in the zoo.
I mean, living in the Caribbean, I'm interested in the Rossifari. Like, do people ask you, like, is there any, right? I have lots of Rastafari friends.
I have been asked frequently, like fans call themselves Rossifarians and stuff. And I stay away from it most of the time because like, I know that like the Rastafari culture in the States is an excuse to listen to Bob Marley and get stoned, but it is like an actual religious thing. And I respect that.
And they don't use Rastafarian. They say, they don't like the isms. They'll say they're Rastafari.
Okay, cool. Yes. Yeah, that's good to know. But yeah, so I don't like, every once in a while it's probably slipped out of my mouth because I mean, I love a good pun.
Yeah.
But very rarely because I do try and be respectful of that. But I do have, I know fans refer to themselves as that sometimes.
That's cute.
I didn't even really for me, it was just a portmanteau of Rossifari. It didn't hit me until somebody mentioned it like fairly early on. Yes. I was like, well, it's my brand now. It's fine. Too late. Yeah. If somebody complains, we'll look at it. But
it's all good.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks so much.
You're
it's been
welcome. Great. Yeah, this was fun.
All right, so there you have it. And, one of the questions that I'm going to leave y'all with is, what is the word? What should the word be for wild? What does wild mean? What does captive mean? What do these words mean to you? I'm really curious to hear your takes on that. And I'm really curious to hear if anybody has some good special, thoughts on whether it should be wild or free ranging or I don't know, human adjacent? I don't know. I'm curious to hear what you got. I mean, us Rossifarians like making up words, whether it's Zoy, the joy you get at zoos, or, just adding lit to any animal to make it a baby. It's what we do. So, feel free to reach out and let me know what you think. Of course, as always, I want to say thank you to the entire team at the Trevor-Lovejoy Zoo. You will be hearing from a lot more of them in the upcoming weeks as we bounce around from some different facilities. But I did get a ton of additional great content there. This was just the first of many interviews that I did while I was there. And hey, what the heck, while we're handing out thanks, we might as well say thank you to all of my patrons, especially my Red Panda level patrons, Dr. Laura Shank, Dr. Stephen Williamson, Barbara Bennett, Jenny Owens, Melissa Reed, Carrie Kirkpatrick, John Lewis, who is also here for stickers, Kevin Williams, and Cormac McMuffin. Ow. And with all of that said, my friends, I will see you here on Friday. And until then, remember the word credits backwards is Steiderk. The Rossifari podcast is produced, hosted, and engineered by John Rossi. Editing and fact-checking by John and Dr. Zoe Rossi. Our theme song is Sevens by Nathan Burke, performed by Nathan and John. Interrupting John theme and additional voices by Taylor Isaac Gray. You can reach John directly on Instagram and Facebook at Rossifari or by email at rossifaripod@gmail.com. Rossifari is part of the Daydreamer Media Network. Now, stop listening to me and go visit a zoo.